So far, we've only factored quadratic trinomials where the leading coefficient was 1. If the leading coefficient is not 1, how do we split up that middle term? Well, let's look at a problem where we multiply two linear binomials. So let's say we want to multiply 3x minus 2 times 5x plus 7. Right, 3x times 5x is 15x squared. 3x times 7 is 21x. 5x times negative 2 is negative 10x. And negative 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. Now, I could finish this problem, right? I could write down that the product is 15x squared plus 11x minus 14. But that's not actually what I want you to notice, right? I want you to notice something about these two coefficients versus these two coefficients, right? These two coefficients, we had 3 times 5 and negative 2 times 7. And then these two coefficients, we had 3 times 7 and negative 2 times 5. Do you notice what I'm noticing? These are going to have to be equal. How do I know that without working this out? Well, 3, 5, negative 2, and 7. I'm multiplying together the same four numbers. This gives me a method to figure out how to split up my middle term, because it gives me a rule for these two coefficients. Now, to describe this method, I'm going to give some names to things. If I write a quadratic trinomial just in descending order like this is called standard form. We refer to the coefficients as a, b, and c. So a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the constant. Why do I want to give names to these? I'm about to teach you a technique called the AC method. What is this AC method? Well, it has 3 steps, basically. We find two numbers whose product is the same as the product of A and C, including the sign, positive or negative, and whose sum is the same as B, again, including the sign. Then we split up the constant term using those numbers, and we proceed to factor by grouping. Now, there are other methods of factoring quadratic trinomials. Most of them amount to look and know the factors, or trial and error. If you happen to look at a quadratic trinomial and see an easy way to factor it without using this method, go for it. Otherwise, use this method. So let me show you another example and then I'll give you one to try. Suppose we want to factor 6x squared minus 5x minus 6. Our first step will be to multiply 6 times negative 6. 6 times negative 6 equals negative 36. We want two numbers whose product is negative 36 and whose sum is negative 5. Let's see, negative 36 times 1, their sum is negative 35. Negative 18 times 2, their sum is negative 16. Negative 12 times 3, their sum is negative 9. negative 9 times 4. There we go. The sum is negative 5. So we want to split up this negative 5x middle term as negative 9x plus positive 4x. So we'll have our 6x squared here, our negative 6 down here, and then we'll have a negative 9x and a positive 4x. Let's see, looking at my rows, I think here there's a 3 as a common factor and an x as a common factor. Here I only see a 2. So 3x times what is 6x squared? 3x times 2x is 6x squared. Is it the case that 2x times 2 is 4x? Yes, 2x works out. 3x times what is negative 9x? 3x times negative 3 is negative 9x. Is it the case that negative 3 times 2 is negative 6? Yes, that also checks out. So my factors are 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 3. All right, I'm going to give you one of these to try. Factor the trinomial 3x squared plus 17x minus 6. Pause the video and try this now. All right, so our first step again will be to write 3 times negative 6 is negative 18. We want two numbers whose product is negative 18 and whose sum is positive 17. I think I'll start with positive 18 times negative 1 here. Their sum is positive 17. So I've already got it. So I'll want my 3x squared up here, my negative 6 down here. I'll want my positive 18x and my negative 1x. All right then, in this row, what are my common factors? I see that 3 is a number they have in common, and they have an x in common. In this row, I'm betting it's going to be negative 1 that I'll need. 3x times what is 3x squared? 3x times x is 3x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x. So x checks out. 3x times what is 18x? 3x times 6 is 18x. 6 times negative 1, is it negative 6? It is, so 6 checks out. What are our factors? 3x minus 1 times x plus 6.